So, namaskar, friends, and welcome once again. In this lecture, we are going to talk about Anita Desai's Baumgartner's Bombay. In the previous class, we discussed Bye Bye Blackbird by Anita Desai, and this is yet another novel that has a predominantly diasporic theme in it. I introduced this novel while discussing Anita Desai uh, in a previous lecture, and I told you this novel is the story of Hugo Baumgartner, a German Jewish refugee who flees Nazi Germany and eventually settles in Bombay, now Mumbai, India. The novel oscillates between his present life in Bombay as a lonely, aging man and his traumatic past in Germany and in British controlled India during World War II. So we find that Hugo is caught between identities. He is a European by birth and Indian by circumstances of his life, and is always haunted by a history of displacement, loss, and survival. As all of us know, that uh, Jews are one of those communities that have always been uh, in exile since the ancient times. And coming from that stock, probably he has it in his tradition or fate to be displaced. And so this novel explores themes of exile, alienation, identity, memory, and long shadows cast by history in the life of Hugo Baumgartner. So, this was published in 1988 and again is one of the better known works by Anita Desai. And we have seen that Anita Desai, in her later novels, focuses her attention on the characters who are diasporic and who have migrated and who are struggling with their identity and sense of loss and nostalgia, and are sort of misfit in their own lives. So, in the previous class, also, when we were discussing Bye Bye Blackbird, we talked about two Indian characters, Adit and Dev, who were living in Britain. And, both of them were nostalgic about their past in India. And while initially we found that Adit is settled, Indian in Britain, has also married British lady, but later on we find that all his complacency of being settled in Britain is at a later stage. It comes proper, and ultimately he realizes that he is an outsider in a country which does not recognize him as a naturalized or natural citizen. And so there is a very strong desire in him to go back to his Indian roots. On the other hand, Dev also has similar nostalgic feelings and always tries to manage his emotions, burying himself in Indian food, Indian music, and Indian culture. But he shows better resilience, or maybe he's still undecided what he precisely wants to do. And so by the end of the novel, he is the one who chooses to be in Britain rather than going back. On the other hand, Adit chooses to go back to India. So in this novel also we find that Hugo Baumgartner, but yeah, I mean, rather than an Indian going abroad, it's somebody who comes to India from outside, and he is a German Jewish refugee. And again, when we look at the fiction of Anita Desai, we find, and again, between these two novels, if we make a comparison, we can find that, this is an example of a forced diaspora, while the earlier one was a diaspora by choice because, Adit and Dev undertake a journey to Britain not under any kind of apparent force or compulsion, but rather, with an intention to earn some name and fame and quality life. That's why they go to England for studies, and then they feel like trying their luck in that country so that they can be well settled. On the other hand, in this novel we find that Hugo Baumgartner, a German Jewish, is an example of a forced diaspora because he is a refugee and he has to flee from Nazi Germany because at that point in time the Jews are being racially targeted, and that's why he fears persecution, fears his life, and that's why he leaves Germany. So in the novel, he is portrayed as a man without a country, uh, a nowhere man, because he is neither accepted in his homeland, that is Germany, in his case, because he was born and brought up in Germany, nor in the host land, that is India. But as I said, the Jews have been perpetual exiles in the sense, when we talk about the earliest diaspora, we refer to the Babylonian exile of 586 BC, in which the Jews were exiled to Babylonia. And so, ever since, this is one community which has been always on the run. But then they have also shown better resilience and have certainly contributed immensely to the world economy because of their industrious nature. Although, despite all their successes, they have not been one of the most loved people around the world. That's why Hugo shares that historical rootlessness, which is part of his Jewish identity. And basically, we find that although he is born and brought up in Germany, but he is not really having a sense of belonging either there, because he is not accepted in that society either. And when he comes to India, he finds that India is completely different, and because of his racial otherness, he does not, despite his efforts, he does not find that kind of acceptance in the Indian society either. So the novel explores the themes of identity crisis that Hugo Baumgartner faces, his displacement, his fractured nature of belonging. He is not able to really reconcile either to his life in Germany or in India, and so it leaves him perpetually on the edges of the two places. And so this novel, as I said, is a classic example of forceful diaspora because Hugo does not come to India by choice, but because of the circumstances in Germany that are against him. So it is yet another example of a full diaspora or forced diaspora, like much of the colonial Indian diaspora to Caribbeans and other places. So, if we look at the summary of the novel, we find that Hugo escapes Nazi Germany after his father's suicide and his family's persecution in Germany, um, virtually leaving him with nothing to survive, and that's why he also fears for his life and he has to run away in order to save himself. First, he settles in Calcutta, but because of conflict between Hindus and Muslims due to partition, he flees to Bombay. So, from one conflict zone to another conflict zone, and then finally he, lands in Bombay, which is considered a truly cosmopolitan city in India. And during the World War II, he is also imprisoned by the British authorities, um, as he is suspected. So, after release from the jail, he settles in Bombay, working in a timber trade. Meanwhile, he undergoes a tough life, always considered as an outsider. As I said, in Germany, being a Jew, he is considered an outsider. And in India, you know, again, because of his race and his color, he is easily othered as a Firangi or a foreigner. So, in both these societies, we find that he is a misfit, and that's why he is always on the edges. So, after a turbulent life, his life ends when a drug addicted German youth murders him, and this is again fate that he leaves Germany to survive but is killed by a German youth, ultimately losing his life. So, when we talk about this novel, it abounds in the themes of diaspora. Like I said earlier, it deals with identity crisis, it deals with exile, displacement, alienation. So, first, when we talk about identity crisis, we find that Baumgartner is a homeless, nationless man. He neither belongs to Germany nor to India, and again, he has little comfort to call any place his home, neither Germany nor Calcutta or Bombay. So he has nowhere to go to regain his lost identity, and he is the same in his native soil and the alien one, an outsider, a nowhere man in every sense, as Jacob would call it. So in Germany, he is a little darker compared to the other Europeans, and that's why he is spotted as other. And again, belonging to Jewish community, he is othered. And in India, he is a little fairer compared to the natives, and that's why he is always, marked as a Firangi or a foreigner, accepting but not accepted. Well, uh, this is an excerpt from the novel. He himself is accepting, always willing to engross the culture of Germany and later on that of India. But nonetheless, these two places don't really accept him. So, accepting but not accepted, that was the story of his life, the one thread that ran through it all. In Germany, he has been dark. His darkness had marked him the Jew. In India, he was fair, and that marked him the Firangi. In both lands, the unacceptable. So, he suffers this identity crisis, whether he is in Germany or in India. And this perpetual identity crisis is very much diasporic when we talk about the life of diasporic subject. So, his mixed language, like German and Bombay English, also signifies his liminal existence and cultural hybridity. He embodies Homi Bhabha's third space of diasporic hybridity, as we earlier discussed, because he cannot be part of the mainstream culture either in Germany or in India, and that's why he has to survive in a liminal hybrid space. In that, he can also be compared to Srinivas, the protagonist of the novel Nowhere Man by Kamla Markande, who also experiences the same feeling. In England, he neither feels, having spent 5 decades in England, he does not feel the same kind of emotional attachment with his home country and home culture anymore. And in England, also, he is an um, alien in the sense, he is not accepted fully as an Englishman. So he is also living on the margins, belonging nowhere, neither here nor there. So he is a nowhere man. And like him, Hugo also is a nowhere man because he does not have his roots either in Germany or in India, and is always found floating. So Hugo moves to Bombay and spends nearly 30 years of his life uh, like Srinivas, spent 50 years of his life in Britain, and but ironically, it could never become his place, or a place that accepted his identity as a non-native individual. So both these characters try their best to, send down their roots and feel at home, but then they are not allowed to feel so because of the prevailing circumstances and because of the treatment that they get from the people around, who always treat them as different and other. So I quote from the novel, "The life of Bombay, which had been Baumgartner's life 30 years now, or rather, the setting of his life, he had never actually entered it, never quite captured it. Damply, odorously, cacophonously, palpable as it was, it had been elusive still." So, friends, it happens with Srinivas as well, that even after spending 5 decades in Britain, still he finds that he is not competent enough to call himself an Englishman, and touches the English culture superficially, and does not look so confident that he can, really say that he is an assimilated British. And the same thing happens with Hugo, who spends 30 years of his precious time in India, in Bombay. But despite 30 years of his life in Bombay, he still feels he has been on the edges, has not entered the city as such, and is kept wondering what his true identity is, what his true experiences are, and whether he really understands the dynamics of the city. So it all looks elusive even after spending 30 years of life in Mumbai for Hugo. So he looks to be in a perpetual exile. He suffers from political exile after the anti Jewish attitude in Nazi Germany, and the political upheavals lead to financial crisis and suicide of his father. And due to Holocaust, he experiences the internal exile and feels alienated in his own country, forcing him to run away from there. Later, he is forced to leave Germany in search of a new future in the safe shores of India. However, his romantic imagination of India gets shattered the moment he lands in India. The political situations in India, like the partition and others, threaten his existence and lands him in jail. So he finds that the society and the circumstances in India at that point in time are also equally volatile. And so, what he tries to escape, his fate brings him to that, and he is persecuted also, although it is for a brief period of time only. So he is always, in a way, in a perpetual exile, true to his Jewish descent. The other important aspect of diaspora that is clear in this novel is a sense of acute alienness. So he feels alienation. A Jewish protagonist suffers from double alienation, first in Germany and second in India, and this again seems to be his fate as a diasporic. In Germany, due to Nazi persecution, his father commits suicide, and later he has to flee to India in order to save his life. And but India also could not accept him, and that's the reason, he always remains alienated and othered. I quote what Desai has to observe: "The eyes of the people who passed by glanced at him, who was still strange and unfamiliar to them, and all said, 'Firangi, foreigner.'" So, even in India, he is not treated as a native, and is always a curious subject for the passers by, and that makes him different from all other people and stops him from really assimilating um, in the mainstream culture. And so he always feels alienated, alone, and always struggling with his true identity. Wilson aptly points out, and I quote, that Hugo was an alien in a strange land, came from a foreign country, was of a different color, spoke a different language, had a different religion. Hugo was a mere non entity. So it's a very sad story for him that he is a non entity even in his own country, and the country of adoption, that is India, he remains a non entity. Later, his business partners like Habibullah and Chimanlal's son also exploit him and abandon him, that eventually results in social marginalization as well. So his life as such is miserable, whether it's Germany or uh, India, and all his efforts to piece it together seems to be inadequate, and does not really help him organize himself and find his true identity. So his cramped flat behind the Taj Hotel becomes a metaphor for his invisible existence, where he lives unwatched and disconnected from society's rhythms. So even if he is living in one of the most buzzing cities of the world with a huge population and a lot of activities all around, he still remains utterly aloof and alone and invisible. And certainly his life is not a very happy one. If we talk about his existence, he's so much fed up with his human company that he prefers to stay with cats in dark, dingy, and shabby flat behind the Taj Hotel. And this can itself tell us about the extent to which he feels lonely and othered from the fellow human beings, that he finds solace in animals rather than the company of humans who do not treat him with the same kind of dignity that he deserves as a human. And the only mistake that he has committed or has been forced to commit is that he had to leave his country and land in a different country. So his sense of otherness, constructed in part by his dislocation in terms of language, stays with him throughout his life. From the first impressions of his place on the margins in his German school at Christmas, as mentioned in the novel, to his experiences in India, Hugo remains an outsider, aware of his own separation from the mainstream, his isolation from community, and his place as a marginal figure. So, Hugo's separation comes from the reactions of those around him. They shrink from him and he from them because of their fear of contact, because contact contaminates. Acceptance, that which Hugo gives and never receives, comes from a willingness to make contact to accommodate the ways of those who are perceived as different. So we find that Hugo always tries to come closer to his Indian counterparts, but is not welcome, and people always distance themselves from him. So he feels certain hesitation in opening up or coming closer, and for his own survival, he hesitates and keeps a safe distance from them. So Hugo shrinks from contact because he knows the people hate it. He is making the effort in a gesture which is accepting, but which denies any possibility of his own acceptance. he sees himself as infinitely accepting, as always accommodating of others, but one who is never himself accepted by those others. So Baumgartner's Bombay is thus a portrayal of loneliness and abject disaster, where the protagonist is unable to resolve his dilemmas and his predicament is beyond any solutions. So we find that Hugo Baumgartner turns out to be an archetypal diasporic figure because he is not just a refugee, he is doubly displaced as well. First, as a German Jew fleeing the rise of Nazism, then as a stateless alien in British India, where he is interned during World War II, despite being a victim of the regime they are fighting, and he does not belong anywhere, neither to Germany nor to India, and his dislocation and cultural in betweenness, they are very much apparent as he leads a fragmented sense of self, and he adopts Indian habits, lives in Bombay, and speaks local languages, yet he remains rooted emotionally in a European identity that is now obsolete. His Jewish German past has been obliterated by the Holocaust. This hybridity, rather than being empowering, is isolating for Hugo. He is neither fully Western nor fully Indian, and his identity is marked by loss, longing, and the impossibility of return. And then memory and the diasporic condition, they are very much apparent as we find him going backward and forward in time, comparing his life and turning, reflective every now and then. Um, Unlike diasporic narratives that find strength in dual identities, um, Desai offers a different perspective altogether, in that she does not find any possibility of anything positive, and she always talks about the impossibility of belonging, in contrast to some of the writers, later writers, who always think that it's possible for the diasporic subject to really make a positive contribution and also settle in the host country. So she presents a bleaker view of diaspora life, where hybridity also does not provide them any kind of positive outcome, as they never ever achieve a coherent sense of belonging. And again, the death of Hugo at the hands of a fellow German, who has taken a very different route toward post war criminality and opportunism, it symbolizes the failure of reconciliation, both personal and historical. So, I mean, she does not really look at diaspora as a bridge between cultures, but looks at it as a chasm of disconnection. And accordingly, the narrative is also non linear, shifting timelines that itself tells us about the fragmented psyche of Hugo. Just as diaspora disrupts linear identities, the novel disrupts linear storytelling. The blending of times, places, and tones reflects the condition of being in between, never fully here nor there. So, in conclusion, we can really say that Baumgartner's Bombay talks about a diaspora which is not simply about geographic displacement, rather, it's a permanent state of spiritual homelessness that is part of a Jewish psyche. And through Hugo, Desai critics romanticize notions of cultural hybridity and instead presents a sobering portrait of diaspora as enduring alienation. So, Hugo's life in Bombay is not a new beginning, as many of the writers would think or romanticize, but it's a slow, melancholic eraser, a testament to how history can exile not just people but identities, languages, and even memories themselves. So, friends, this Baumgartner Bombay is diasporic text that talks about the classical notion of diaspora, where diaspora is looked at as loss, displacement, and loss of connect and loss of identity, with almost no possibility of any positive outcome. As we find in the case of Hugo, he has lost connect with Germany because he has been forced to leave Germany because of the Nazi Holocaust to save his life. But his displacement from Germany to India, which otherwise is considered a very welcome country living on the ideals of multiculturalism, still it proves futile in his case, in that he is not accepted by the mainstream Bombay culture and remains on the margins, lives a lonely life, a life of a destitute to say the least, and that is how his life ends without any kind of saving grace. So, friends, in the next class, we'll be talking about another very powerful writer of Indian diaspora, Bharati Mukherjee. And the objective in selecting this text is that to see how Indian diaspora has been looked at from different lenses of different authors, and they all tell the story of diaspora differently. Some of them are on the conservative side, and so their narratives come very close to classical notion of diaspora, where diaspora is not attached with something positive but has a sad connotation. If you talk about Jewish diaspora or all the earlier diasporas, including the colonial diaspora of India. But when we make a move to the post colonial writers who talk about the more recent diasporas, obviously they have tales of celebration of this dislocation with lot of potential. So we can certainly look at the building of these narratives from these different lenses, and can see how diaspora as a discipline has also grown and changed and transformed as the time has uh, passed. So we'll again look at another writer in the next class. As I said, we'll discuss Bharati Mukherjee. Till then, these are the references. Thank you very much. Thank you.